On January 31, 2013, 21-year-old Canadian student Elisa Lam checked into room 641 of the Cecil Hotel in downtown Los Angeles. She had arrived in LA just 3 days earlier to attend classes at the University of California, Santa Barbara, where she was studying for a bachelor's degree in science. But after just a few days on campus, she transferred to the Cecil Hotel, which is when she disappeared without a trace. The Cecil Hotel is notoriously infamous and has attracted some pretty unsavory people since it first opened its doors in 1927. With over 60 floors, it's the tallest building in the area and offers views of downtown LA. It also offers cheap accommodation and has long been popular with the city's transient population. There are reports of mysterious deaths throughout the years, along with allegations of a ghost that haunts the halls. So what happened to Elisa? Did the notorious hotel claim another victim, or did something more sinister take place? Let's take a look at some of the clues left behind in this case. Elisa Lam had been living in Vancouver, Canada, with her sister and parents. According to her family, they had no idea she was going to LA and were shocked to find out she'd booked a trip so close to home. All they knew was that Elisa had decided to visit California to study abroad at UCSB, which made her disappearance all the more suspicious. Someone who went to study at a university but never showed up can only be accounted for by two possibilities. They didn't show up willingly, or they didn't show up willingly. And since there was no evidence that Elisa had gotten cold feet about her studies, it was unlikely she would miss her first day of class unless something really drastic had happened. But how did Elisa spend her time leading up to her disappearance? Security footage from the day she disappeared shows her visiting Griffith Park and checking into the hotel around 8 p.m. A few hours later, her phone was seen being used at a Starbucks on Figueroa Street. She then took a bus back to the hotel where she was captured on camera entering the elevator alone. This was the last known sighting of Elisa. If you've ever stayed at a hotel before, then you know that elevators are typically the most well-lit, busiest areas of the building. They're almost always full of people coming and going. It doesn't seem likely that Elisa would have disappeared in such a public area. But security footage reveals some odd details about her behavior. In the video, Elisa presses several floor buttons, starting with the second floor, then moving to the 14th, 20th, 21st, 4th, and finally 6th floors. She stays in the corner of the elevator, away from the cameras, and seems to hide herself from view. At one point, she appears to make a crouching motion as if hiding from something. Then she slowly approaches the elevator doors and steps out briefly before returning to the corner. She does this several times, looking over her shoulder as if expecting someone to follow her. She then steps out of the elevator again, appears to adjust her hair, and makes an unusual hand gesture as if she's pushing something away from her. She does this again before stepping fully out of the elevator. The footage ends here, leaving us with nothing but questions. It's not clear why Elisa would have pressed so many buttons, especially random ones like the second floor. She wasn't going anywhere near there. Why would she hide from something in a crowded elevator? And why would she make strange hand gestures as if she was repelling an invisible threat? Some believe that she may have been high on drugs or having a psychotic episode. But others say that there's something more sinister taking place in the elevator. Could there be something supernatural at work here? Is there a malevolent force in the elevator that preyed upon Elisa's fear? Sadly, we may never know the true answer. Surveillance footage from outside the elevator shows several people entering and exiting the elevator during this time, including a man carrying a large duffel bag. However, none of these people were staying on the 6th floor, and police have no reason to suspect any of them in connection to Elisa's disappearance. After leaving the elevator, she is never seen alive again. The next morning, staff members at the Cecil Hotel noticed that Elisa's key card hadn't been used since 10 p.m. the evening before. When they went to check on her, they found that the room's chain lock was engaged and there was blood on the door handle. Staff immediately called the police, who entered the room and discovered it was empty. No signs of foul play could be found, and there was no indication of where Elisa might have gone. Her laptop, wallet, cell phone, and passport were still in the room along with her clothes and personal belongings. Something didn't add up here. Elisa wouldn't have disappeared without her phone, money, or identification. And if she'd simply checked out, someone would have seen her leave the premises. The chain lock indicated that she hadn't left the room voluntarily. It was clear that the police needed to search the hotel thoroughly, but they soon hit a roadblock. Elisa's room was located on the 64th floor, but where the elevator stopped working. This meant that officers couldn't get to the 64th floor or any of the floors above the 59th. When they reported this issue to management, they were told that the elevator frequently broke down and they should use the stairs. This proved to be difficult because, among other reasons, there were no working lights between the 60th and 64th floors. So the officers had to feel their way through the darkness and climb 4 flights of stairs while carrying flashlights. They combed through every room on those 4 floors, but they found no sign of Elisa. The police then descended the stairs once more and repeated the process on the floors below until they were certain that she was not hiding in the hotel. At this point, they had no choice but to call in a dive team. Elisa had vanished without a trace, but the police believed that she must be somewhere in the hotel. Because she'd left all her belongings behind, it seemed unlikely that she would have left the premises. So investigators focused on searching the hotel itself. When they searched the roof, they found the open door to the water tank. And when they peered inside, they found Elisa's body floating in the murky water. Strangely enough, guests at the Cecil Hotel had been drinking and showering with the very same water that ultimately killed Elisa. But how did she end up in the water tank? The tank itself was located 50 feet up on the roof and could only be accessed through a ladder. Since the door to the tank was locked, investigators knew that whoever put Elisa's body there had done so before the door was closed. This meant that she would have had to have been placed there while the door was open. But how did she get up there in the first place? When investigators searched Elisa's room, they found no signs of forced entry or a struggle, and they didn't find anything missing. It's unlikely that she would have willingly left her valuables behind and climbed up to the water tank. This leads us to believe that something caused her to panic and flee to the roof. But what could have scared her so badly? And why would someone place her body in the water tank once she was dead? Was it a deranged killer or something more sinister? Since Elisa's death occurred in such a strange way, the media was quick to blame ghosts. The Cecil Hotel has a reputation for being haunted, and many believe that Elisa's death was the result of an angry spirit. However, this is unlikely given the facts of the case. It's hard to imagine a ghost terrifying Elisa so much that she fled to the roof, especially considering she had no history of mental illness or substance abuse issues. Instead, many believe that someone brutally murdered Elisa and then hid her body in the water tank. If she was placed there while the tank door was still open, it means that her body was on the roof before the door was closed. This means that whoever killed her would have had to carry her body up a ladder, which would have been very difficult. They would have had to lift her over the top of the tank and into the dark, murky water. Unless the person responsible was exceptionally strong, it's unlikely that they would have been able to pull off such a feat. Not only that, but the water in the tank was contaminated. It was filled with algae and dirt and was never cleaned. Whoever placed her body in the tank would have risked serious illness or infection just to hide her there. This leads us to believe that the murderer was either someone who was willing to risk their health to cover up the crime, or someone who had already infected with something like hepatitis. So what happened to Elisa Lam? Who was responsible for her death? Unfortunately, this mystery may never be solved. As the investigation continued, the police found no evidence that pointed to a suspect. There were no signs of a struggle in the room. She had no known enemies, and there was no indication of what might have motivated her murder. In the end, Elisa's death was ruled an accidental drowning, but many believe the truth is far darker. The last confirmed sighting of Elisa was captured on security footage, and although the clip has been heavily debated and analyzed, there are still plenty of unanswered questions. What do you think happened to Elisa? Do you believe that she was the victim of murder, suicide, or something else entirely? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.